Welcome back, guys. This is going to be part 3 of a 4-part series for Chapter 1 in Lord of the Flies. So let's get back into it. We've met some of the characters and the boys are still showing up, and so we're still being introduced to some of the characters. And it's important to pay attention to how William Golding describes these boys, because their physical features are going to give you hints as to their personalities. So here we go. Within the diamond haze of the beach, something dark was fumbling along. Ralph saw it first and watched till the intentness of his gaze drew all eyes that way. Then the creature stepped from mirage onto clear sand, and they saw that the darkness was not all shadow but mostly clothing. The creature was a party of boys, marching approximately in step in 2 parallel lines, and dressed in strangely eccentric clothing. Shorts, shirts, and different garments they carried in their hands, but each boy wore a square black cap with a silver badge on it. Their bodies, from throat to ankle, were hidden by black cloaks, which bore a long silver cross on the left breast, and each neck was finished off with a ham-bone frill. The heat of the tropics, the descent, the search for food, and now this sweaty march along the blazing beach had given them the complexions of newly washed plums. The boy who controlled them was dressed in the same way, though his cap was golden. His cap badge was golden, which sets him apart as the leader of the boys. When his party was about 10 yards from the platform, he shouted an order and they halted, gasping, sweating, swaying in the fierce light. The boy himself came forward, vaulted onto the platform with his cloak flying, and peered into what to him was almost complete darkness. "Where's the man with the trumpet?" Ralph, sensing his sun blindness, answered him. "There's no man with a trumpet, only me." The boy came close and peered down at Ralph, screwing up his face as he did so. What he saw of the fair-haired boy with the creamy shell on his knees did not seem to satisfy him. He turned quickly, his black cloak circling. "Isn't there a ship, then?" Inside the floating cloak he was tall, thin, and bony, and his hair was red beneath the black cap. His face was crumpled and freckled, and ugly without silliness. Out of this face stared 2 light blue eyes, frustrated now and turning, or ready to turn, to anger. "Isn't there a man here?" Ralph spoke to his back. "No, we're having a meeting. Come and join in." The group of cloaked boys began to scatter from close line. The tall boy shouted at them, "Choir, stand still!" Wearily obedient, the choir huddled into line and stood there swaying in the sun. Nonetheless, some began to protest faintly. "But Merridew, please Merridew, can't we?" Then one of the boys flopped on his face in the sand and the line broke up. They heaved the fallen boy to the platform and let him lie. Merridew, his eyes staring, made the best of a bad job. "All right then, sit down, let him alone." "But Merridew—" "He's always throwing a feint," said Merridew. "He did in Gibb and Addis and at Martin's over the placenta." This last piece of shot brought sniggers from the choir, who perched like black birds on the criss-cross trunks and examined Ralph with interest. Piggy asked no names. He was intimidated by this uniformed superiority and the offhand authority in Merridew's voice. He shrank to the other side of Ralph and busied himself with his glasses. Merridew turned to Ralph. "Aren't there any grown-ups?" "No." Merridew sat down on a trunk and looked round the circle. "Then we'll have to look after ourselves." Secure on the other side of Ralph, Piggy spoke timidly. "That's why Ralph made a meeting, so's we can decide what to do. We've heard names. That's Johnny. Those 2, the twins, Sam and Eric. Which is Eric? You? No, you're Sam." "I'm Sam and I'm Eric." "We'd better have all names," said Ralph, "so I'm Ralph." "We got most names," said Piggy. "Got 'em just now." "Kids' names," said Merridew. "Why should I be Jack? I'm Merridew." Ralph turned to him quickly. This was the voice of one who knew his own mind. "Then," went on Piggy, "that boy, I forget." "You're talking too much," said Jack Merridew. "Shut up, fatty." Laughter arose. "He's not not Fatty," cried Ralph. "His real name's Piggy." "Piggy! Piggy! Oh, Piggy!" A storm of laughter arose, and even the tiniest child joined in. For the moment, the boys were a closed circuit of sympathy with Piggy outside. He went very pink, bowed his head, and cleaned his glasses again. Finally, the laughter died away, and the naming continued. There was Maurice, next in size among the choir boys to Jack, but broad and grinning all the same. There was a slight furtive boy whom no one knew, who kept to himself with an inner intensity of avoidance and secrecy. He muttered that his name was Roger, and was silent again. Bill, Robert, Harold, Henry, the choir boy who had fainted, sat up against a palm trunk, smiled pallidly at Ralph, and said that his name was Simon. Jack spoke. "We've got to decide about being rescued." There was a buzz. One of the small boys, Henry, said that he wanted to go home. "Shut up," said Ralph absently. He lifted the conch. "Seems to me we ought to have a chief to decide things." "A chief! A chief!" "I ought to be chief," said Jack with simple arrogance, "because I'm chapter chorister and head boy. I can sing C sharp." You get the idea that Jack Meridew's kind of full of himself here. Another buzz. "Well then," said Jack, He hesitated. The dark boy, Roger, stirred at last and spoke up. Pay close attention to how William Golding describes Roger. This is a very important character in this novel. They've already mentioned that he's kind of a mysterious character, and they're calling him the dark boy, and so there is a certain darkness about this kid already. So Roger speaks up and he says, "Let's have a vote." "Yes, vote for chief. Let's vote." This toy of voting was almost as pleasing as the conch. Jack started to protest, but the clamor changed from the general wish for a chief to an election by acclaim of Ralph himself. None of the boys could have found good reason for this. What intelligence had been shown was traceable to Piggy, while the most obvious leader was Jack. But there was a stillness about Ralph as he sat that marked him out. There was his size and attractive appearance, and most obscurely, yet most powerfully, there was the conch. The being that had blown that had sat waiting for them on the platform with a delicate thing balanced on his knees, was set apart. "Him with the shell! Ralph! Ralph! Let him be chief with the trumpet thing!" Ralph raised a hand for silence. "All right. Who wants Jack for chief?" With dreary obedience, the choir raised their hands. "Who wants me?" Every hand outside the choir except Piggy's was raised immediately. Then Piggy, too, raised his hand grudgingly into the air. Ralph counted. "I'm chief, then." The circle of boys broke into applause. Even the choir applauded, and the freckles on Jack's face disappeared under a blush of mortification. He started up, then changed his mind and sat down again while the air rang. Ralph looked at him, eager to offer something. "The choir belongs to you, of course." "They could be the army." "Or hunters." "They could be—" The suffusion drained away from Jack's face. Ralph waved again for silence. "Jack's in charge of the choir. They can be— What do you want them to be?" "Hunters." Jack and Ralph smiled at each other with shy liking. The rest began to talk eagerly. I want you to pay really close attention to the relationship between Jack and Ralph over the course of this book. It's going to change, and some different dynamics are going to come into play, so definitely pay attention. Right now it says that between them there's a shy liking, so let's see how that develops. Jack stood up. "All right, choir, take off your togs." As if released from class, the choir boys stood up, chattered, piled their black cloaks on the grass. Jack laid his on the trunk by Ralph. His gray shorts were sticking to him with sweat. Ralph glanced at them admiringly, and when Jack saw his glance, he explained, "I tried to get over that hill to see if there was water all around, but your shell called us." Ralph smiled and held up the conch for silence. "Listen, everybody, I've got to have time to think things out. I can't decide what to do straight off. If this isn't an island, we might be rescued straight away. So we've got to decide if this is an island. Everybody must stay around here and wait and not go away. 3 of us, if we take more, we get all mixed and lose each other. 3 of us will go on an expedition and find out. I'll go, and Jack, and... He looked round the circle of eager faces. There was no lack of boys to choose from. And Simon. The boys round Simon giggled, and he stood up laughing a little. Now that the pallor of his faint was over, he was a skinny, vivid little boy, with a glance coming up from under a hut of straight hair that hung down, black and coarse. He nodded at Ralph. I'll come. And I. Jack snatched from behind him a sizable sheath knife and clouded it into a trunk. The buzz rose and died away. Piggy stirred. I'll come. Ralph turned to him. You're no good on a job like this. All the same. We don't want you, said Jack flatly. 3's enough. Piggy's glasses flashed. I was with him when he found the conch. I was with him before anyone else. Jack and the others paid no attention. There was a general dispersal. Ralph, Jack, and Simon jumped off the platform and walked along the sand past the bathing pool. Piggy hung, bumbling behind them. If Simon walks in the middle of us, said Ralph, then we could talk over his head. The 3 of them fell into step. This meant that every now and then Simon had to do a double shuffle to catch up with the others. Presently Ralph stopped and turned back to Piggy. Look. Jack and Simon pretended to notice nothing. They walked on. You can't come. Piggy's glasses were misted again, this time with humiliation. You told him, after what I said. His face flushed, his mouth trembled. After I said I didn't want... What on earth are you talking about? About being called Piggy. I said I didn't care as long as they didn't call me Piggy, and I said not to tell, and then you went straight out. Stillness descended on them. Ralph, looking with more understanding at Piggy, saw that he was hurt and crushed. He hovered between the 2 courses of apology or further insult. Better Piggy than Fatty, he said at last, with the directness of genuine leadership. And anyway, I'm sorry if you feel like that. Now go back, Piggy, and take names. That's your job. So long. He turned and raced after the other 2. Piggy stood, and the rose of indignation faded slowly from his cheeks. He went back to the platform. All right, guys. That's it for part 3 of 4 for chapter 1. Click the next video and get the rest of this chapter.